Hello, good morning. We are getting ready for the first keynote speaking of the day. So my name is Federico Trigos. I'm a research professor at the School of Business. Welcome for being here this morning. You know, the world is getting into deeper and deeper trouble, and this trouble is more complex as time goes by. So we as a university have some responsibility to be leading, or at least in a leading position of the endeavors of trying to mend or try to solve some of these huge problems that we are getting. So these problems are everywhere, as a human society, as governments, as cities, as enterprises, etc. And we know that if we are going to have a chance to make a dent on these problems or to have a significant improvement of them, we have to realize that chances are that the materialization of that solution could be a STEM product, a science, technology, engineering, or mathematics in some shape. But this materialization would have a chance to work if it was conceived and developed using quantitative and non-quantitative disciplines, using scholars and practitioners, taking into account all the stakeholders involved, not only the guy who's paying, either the government or the company, all the stakeholders involved. And once you have the plan to do it, and everybody is in agreement, and in the plan you have something good to do, then you have to use management knowledge to set it up and make sure that it will work all the way until a better solution is achieved. And that is the transdisciplinary approach. We have an international society of transdisciplinary engineering, and today we have with us Professor Linda Nunes from the University of Bath, which she's one of the high-end scientists and leading professionals on the transdisciplinary world. So I offer you an introduction video of Professor Nunes. Please, go ahead with the video.
Linda Nunes, Director of Center for People-Led Digitalization, Director, Digital Manufacturing and Design, and Professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering at the University of Bath. She is a professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering at the University of Bath in the UK. Her research focus is whole life value analysis from concept design through to the in-service in-use phases, with a particular focus on manufacturing industry and organizational performance. Integral to creating value and impact from her research is her work in transdisciplinary engineering. This involves integrating the knowledge and methods of natural and social scientists and academics and non-academic stakeholders. Linda was president of the International Society of Transdisciplinary Engineering until July 2023 and has led on several consortiums, including the Transdisciplinary Engineering Designed Research and Made Smarter Innovation, Center for People-Led Digitalization. Let's welcome Linda Nunes.
So I'll just start. I'm just checking I can get this working first. Right, here we go. Thank you for having me here today. I should work out, I'm Linda Nunes, and I'm from the University of Bath. And in case you're wondering where Bath is in the UK, it's about an hour and a half from London, so we're not too far away from the centre. And Bath has the kind of university we have. I work in the Department of Mechanical Engineering, and we're one of the top kind of 5 departments in the UK for mechanical engineering. But what I want to talk about today is the work I've been doing on, we put it under the banner of transdisciplinary engineering, but in effect, all the work I do is focused on helping industry, or helping society, or helping people progress and do well and make things better for everyone. So what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of background about what I've done in the past, how I then came into transdisciplinary engineering. To be honest, I was doing it anyway, but we didn't have a right academic word for it. I'll give you a little bit of 2 slides on the theory of what I believe it is. And then I'm going to tell you why people are important, because I think if any of you know, I think the President was saying there was a question about how do we solve the pollution in Monterey. Actually, it still comes down to people. It isn't just the actual technology, it's also about the people, so I'll show you how important that is. I'll give you some examples of projects that we've done and what we've learned about it, about doing transdisciplinary work. Very easy to say, not always that easy to do. And then obviously I'll finalize by saying successful organizations are powered by people. So you could have the best tech in the world, but the best tech, if it's not used, doesn't actually work. It doesn't help. And the reason I came to that view, it was a good number of years ago when I did my PhD, and it was at the time when flexible manufacturing systems were actually coming in, automation, robotics and everything. And we worked with quite a large company in the Midlands, and they actually had counterparts in different bits of Europe, and they were putting in an automated system. So they asked the employees, what would you like, what's interest you, what's important, and the employees gave all their feedback in different levels in the organization. And then the company decided, the senior management decided, well, you know what, we'll just put in what we put down in another country, we'll just do the same thing. It didn't work. The employees didn't do anything wrong, but they didn't get the productivity, the improved return on investment because they literally had just hacked everyone off. They were fed up, you didn't listen to me, you didn't think I was important. So they made the system not work without doing anything wrong. So it's really quite important you do get that engagement so people feel part of the process. So here's my background. I'm going to say, most of my talk today will be about giving examples of what we've done and how the kind of impact from it and why people are important in that process and transdisciplinary working. So in my background, before I got into the big projects on transdisciplinary, we did some work when I first started at Bath on cancer screening. Now, I am a manufacturer by background, industrial engineering, so I kind of look at the world through the lens as inputs and outputs. I don't differentiate if you're screening for cancer or you're making a car or you're doing anything else. There's an input and an output, and I want that output to work well. And in this particular case, the cancer we were looking at, in the UK, they did 4 million screens a year. And patients were waiting 6, 8, 10 weeks for any kind of feedback. It was really stressful for them. It had a very big impact on the patients, and we couldn't work out what was going. So we went to look at laboratories, and when we looked at laboratories, you walked around and you had stacks of the tests waiting to be looked at. And the challenge we had in this environment was they had to be looked at by an expert. And the expert looked through the microscope, and because it's really intense work on their eyes, they could only work for 50% of the time. So 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 2 hours on, 2 hours off. So you had a bit of an issue. So you said, actually, can we actually automate this? Can we do something different? And rather than you'd take this particular test and it'd go on a glass slide and you'd look at it and try and find the cells, we had said, oh, right, why don't we actually create antibodies? So we needed people in biology, we need people understanding chemistry and all the bits about doing antibodies to attach to what we call the cancer cells. And then we had imaging experts that then looked at how could we then make these cells fluorescent so we could image it and see, is there any cells there that are maybe problematic? Now, the key thing here, our job was not to say, was it cancer or not? Our job was to say, was it different from what we expected as the norm? So therefore, then the people doing the investigation only looked at samples they had to look at. And therefore, by that point, you're increasing your lead time and everything's going better. But little things we found out. So we had medics, we had vision people, we had engineers, we had the actual cancer screening people looking at the social side of it, how people felt. And we went to the medics and said, right, we want to attach these cells to the antibodies to the cells. Oh no, well, we have to do that. It takes 2 hours, they said, 2 hours. Now, as engineers, or like any different discipline, you say, why 2 hours? That's what we always done. That's custom and practice, that's what we do. But in 10 minutes, you could get as much as you could get in 2 hours. So little things, by putting teams together from different disciplines, you look at things in different ways. So that was the kind of start. And the insight I gained from there is we needed the language to be right. Medics speak a completely different language from me. The social sciences, I think I don't understand the big words. I'm not used to that kind of talking. It was all quite different, so we had to have a common language so we all understood what we were talking about. We understood the importance of people, because if you change that test, you have to get buy-in. Do they trust it? Will it work? Is it safe? And then actually the big cultural change. So you had medics that were saying, this takes 2 hours to attach an antibody, and then we could show them it was something in 10 minutes. That took a big cultural change, and willing to actually change the way they normally work. So that was my first step into it. The next step, and most of you will probably know Airbus, we did a lot of work with Airbus, and what happens is, and this is just in the service department of Airbus, and in their service department, they got 200 pairs a week. And it was all across the world, and part of the thing is, this is not the military side, this is the civil side. When they're looking at that, that airline needs to know, when can my plane be flying again? Plane's not flying, they need passengers, etc. in. And what they did is they looked at the design. And if there's a repair came up, they tried to find every bit of design that had happened before, and therefore not to redesign it, they could use what they'd learned from before. The problem is they had all the files all contained in one PDF. So every email, every picture, everything you had was contained in a PDF. So the designers were taking a long time trying to find the thing that would help them do it quicker. So it didn't always go that quick. So what we actually did is some analytics on the data. We split it down, we looked at the pictures, we looked at the information you got, and how could we, based on the initial bits of the information we were given, give the airline or the person making the decision, how long might this take to repair? It's going to be a day, 2 hours, 5 weeks, is it safe to fly, all that kind of information. And actually, we then got it, they could predict what was happening. And from that, it meant, now when I say 47% increase in productivity, we doubled the number of aircraft flying, doubled the number of repairs, but we didn't need any more staff. You might say that's a good or bad thing, depending on your lens. But basically what we got there is knowledge comes from basically that kind of knowledge is for people and by people. So the engineers were creating the knowledge, but we're finding ways to help them access it. Now, what does that actually mean? Why did I think this was important? What I actually worked out is when I reflected on all the things we'd done, whether it be cancer screening, single vessel processor for pharmaceutics, drug delivery, we did quite a range of things. Everything came down to working with different disciplines and working as a team and being respectful of each other, and actually the people involved in the process and actually engagement. So that then leads to the next bit. So in effect, I was doing what we would call transdisciplinary working. And I have to be honest, I hadn't really used that term before, I hadn't thought about it. But then back in about 2015, 16, I don't know how I came about it, I'd been doing some work, and I put in a grant application saying, we need to train the engineers and designers of the future. And to do that, the designers of the future, they need the specialisms, you do need to specialize. You need to understand the engineering science or the philosophy or whatever your discipline is. You need the nitty-gritty detail. But you actually need to be able to communicate with people that are outside your domain and work as a team and actually take on board what they're saying. So when you look at transdisciplinary, and I think Federico's given you a bit of an introduction, the top bit that's important to me is this purposes level. Basically, you have to have some kind of benefit of society. There's got to be some use to it. Again, depending where your bounds, that could be having water for the whole world. Or it could be, actually in Monterey, I'm getting rid of all the dust on the cement. It depends on your lens of where you might put that context. In the normative level, that's actually where you're working just now. What are your rules and laws and philosophy? What goes on in your kind of context that you're in? So Mexico might be different from the UK, might be different from France, might be different from the US. You've got to work in the bounds that you're working in as well, in that particular focus that you're on. Pragmatic levels, where actually things like engineers, where you're doing things using the engineering science and the fundamental physics to apply. And then empirical level is the kind of fundamental physics underpinning science. So basically, you can't actually get to that top unless you go to the bottom. But you do need to have all these underpinning bits and all the building levels to then say, we can deliver something that's fantastic. These are only 2 slides you're getting on the actual theory. Now, we have a big debate, and I bet you guys have debated it. So I've been watching what terms you've used in this summit. Sometimes it's multidisciplinary, sometimes it's interdisciplinary. I don't think I've seen transdisciplinary yet. And actually, it's really hard to define exactly what it is. And as engineers, as an engineer, I like a nice, clear, it means this. No ambiguity. Make it nice and easy for me. Doesn't quite work that way. But if you look at multidisciplinary, to me, it's disciplines working in their own little bit, working fine, and maybe communicating, and that's it. If you look at interdisciplinary, you are bringing people together, but actually I'm still following my mechanical domain and rules and working it out from my lens, and then my social science lens, and then my medical lens, and then I'll bring it together and hope it all kind of works. When we look at transdisciplinary, and this is easier said than done, in effect, you're kind of like coming into a big mixing pot. So actually, I'm bringing in engineers and social sciences, and the methodologies are not working separately. They start combining together and creating new ways of working. And that's what we call transdisciplinary. So from now on, I'm now going to talk about transdisciplinary working and people. Now, what I've done is I'm quite strategic. So my whole philosophy in working life is I've got to work with people I trust. I don't care if you're the best scholar in the world. If I don't trust you, I won't work with you. I've got to work with people that actually are willing to listen to other viewpoints, that are communicative. So trust in people I like. And then the other thing I have this view in life is work has to be fun. I don't know if any of you think that way, but if it's not fun, I'm not going to turn up, I'm not going to make the effort, and I'm not going to work as well because I'm not having fun. So my philosophies are people you trust, people you like, and have fun. And if you get these all right, good research will come out the bottom. So I do that as my basis. And then what I've done is we've got this first, so it's the first grant funded in the UK, looking particularly at transdisciplinary working. And I got awarded that in 2016 or 17, I can't remember the date. I've been trying for 10 years before that to get funding. And the world gradually caught up. But then what's happened is we've been very strategic in saying to our funders and our government, if we want this to work, we need more than tech. Tech is really, really, really important, but you need the people on board, you need a wider thought process. So now the majority of the big calls that come out from our funding bodies state you must have a transdisciplinary team. They're really focused on it because they realize the potential and benefit. If you want to solve societal big problems, you need to have a team that actually is more than engineers or more than social scientists or more than scientists. You need everyone mixed together. So today, just to give you an idea how it's doing in the UK, I've probably had about £12 million funding directly to our team that looks at transdisciplinary, and probably about another 20 million funding and other projects where we've fed into to help with the work. So it's actually really popular and it gets a lot of money in the UK. That's not the only reason for doing it, but if you want to be a research active, you do need to actually be able to support yourself and do that. So let me give you an example of a project. So the one I'm just finishing off, and it finishes at the end of this month. We expect it to go on for another year because we've secured some more funding, hopefully. Not confirmed yet. But it started in 2021. And it was part of what we call in the UK an Industrial Challenge Strategy Fund. So they did a whole big Made Smarter review. And they actually said the UK was really bad at adopting digital technologies. We were behind all our competitors in the world. We weren't doing well, and we weren't actually adopting the tech that we should be adopting. And the call came out, they had the main bit, and this is more what I would call industrial applied research. Most of the money was going to industry, but as part of that, they then had funding for research centres. And what they said in the research centres, you had to have some kind of societal element of your bid. So we turned it around and said, actually, you know what? We think that's wrong. We actually think that should be the core focus of a research centre, investing in people, looking at people, and how do people help things work. And all the research shows you that. If you even want to change things at a local level, you need people to engage and want to do it to get success. So luckily we were funded. It was co-created with industry. So industry realized the need for doing this kind of work. And we have a transdisciplinary team. So we have people look at augmented reality that do the kind of science behind it. We have management scholars, we have philosophers, we have school of management. We have a real wide range of people, computer scientists. We have all the kind of mixed together. That comes with its pros and cons when you're in an academic environment. It doesn't come with the same pros and cons if you're in the industry, but academia likes its disciplines. If you want to get on in academia, you have to publish in the right area to get the right disciplines and ticks. These are some of the industries we work with. So kind of national highways, we work in Ireland with they're basically the equivalent of our National Health Service. We have Offshore Energy UK, so we've done some of the offshore energy work. The Environment Agency is actually Scorpion Tooling, which is a small to manufacturing enterprise, and the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, so we do quite a lot with the nuclear sector as well. And obviously construction companies such as Lang O'Rourke, etc. So if I explain what people-led digitalization is, I'll give you a minute to read this. So one of the big challenges we have, and it is a challenge, is, I don't know if it's the same in Mexico, but in the UK, the rhetoric we get is, if you digitalize, we'll make your job better. Now that can happen, and it does happen. But imagine if you're that workforce person, and that bit of job that they're making better and doing digitally is the bit of the job that you love the most. That is not making your job better. It's actually going to make you really quite unhappy. And therefore your attrition rate goes down, your staff turnover goes up, etc. So what we said, it aims to improve the outcome of the adoption of digital technologies, but actually really explicitly considering the workforce in the process. That doesn't mean you don't change things, but we want that explicit consideration right at the beginning. And if you look at the UK government just now, skills and culture are one of their key areas, and it will be the key areas over the next 4 or 5 years. So actually we're, again, timing, sometimes it just comes down to timing, or timing is well measured at this point. But this is really important for our workforce of today and the future to get it right. But how did this then cause us some challenges? So my view is, to achieve success at the end, we need this transdisciplinary team, like say philosophers, management, scientists, engineers. And then in the UK, we have a thing called the Research Assessment Excellence Framework, which means if you're a scholar and you want to have a job, say, in our School of Management at Bath, you have to have a 4-star paper, which I think is probably Q1 paper, and there's only certain journals that will qualify for that. We have the same thing as well in our economics department. So if you're an economist, we have economists as well as part of the team. If you're an early career academic, in engineering, I can have 100 authors on, it won't really matter. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter to what I get on my paper. If I'm in economics and I'm an early career academic, and I publish in the wrong journal or have too many authors, it doesn't help me get a job. So I have to also think about, how do we manage the careers of the people involved in this work, because we know we're doing the right thing, but then also at the same time delivering to the project. So we were really focused on how we did this. We literally had everyone end goal focused, working on the same way. But what we did is we then said to them, right, what do you need for your career? This is what you'll deliver to our outputs for the project and give them an end goal. And this is how we'll support you to get your paper that you need in your particular journal, in your particular domain, or any training you need, even if it doesn't actually help the project. Because actually helping the project is having a happy workforce, so always a win-win. And I think Sue is probably in the audience. She's done some analysis of how our researchers felt, and she'll be presenting at that at Federico's conference on the feedback on if this actually worked to help our early career academics participate in transdisciplinary work while not actually having any career negative impacts. So the other thing we also avoid, so that was important for the researchers, end goal focus. So it didn't care if you're in a school of management or a social scientist, or say, at the end goal, our job was to deliver outputs to industry that were usable. That was the focus of our work. That's what we were paid to do. But that was actually quite painful. So any of you in this room, any of you actually create products or make things? Any of you, like what I call core engineers down in the labs? Any of you? Go on, hands up, be brave. Any engineers in the room? You make things physical, don't you? People can see it, right? So we're used to, as engineers, I'm used to a physical thing I can see. And then I'm going to people and saying, hey, we're going to help you work better by getting your people and ethics and culture and right. And they think, well, I can't see that. What do I do with it? So we had to work really hard at keeping people engaged, because you have to do the core. It's still underpinning science and research at the beginning till we get to the deliverables. So we didn't have anything physical to show them. So in the first year the way we did this, we had a thing called a mighty mingle. So the researchers presented their ideas, what they thought industry would really want. And we have I don't know if you have it here, we have a store in the UK called IKEA. It's a department store, furniture building store. And if you go into them, you start off at the beginning, but once you've entered, you cannot escape. Very, very painful. There's no side route, there's no exits, you have to keep going round. So that's what we did in the Mighty Mingle. There was no escape. We brought people in so they had to see what we were doing. And then in year 2, once they've gone a bit further, so that first year they get feedback from industry, then they work with industry to develop what they were doing into what they thought were artifacts or usable tools, not quite ready for industry yet, but an output that the industry could then physically see. So we had an industry forum, and industry came around, they all did a 2-minute elevator pitch about what they'd done, showed them the artifacts if they had any posters. Then the industry people then selected who you work with and what might be help you develop to test later. By the 9 months later, we had industry presenting case studies of how they'd use some of our tools and give a really open critique about what worked, what didn't work, and what we need to improve for the next stage. And then we, looking at acceleration funding, we're hoping to actually get that funding at some point in the next, I should know, within about 3 or 4 weeks. I'm optimistic, I'm always optimistic. So let me give you some example outputs. So we did that, and we then said, right, what might we use to help industry? And remember, our core focus here is working as a transdisciplinary team to actually help adoption. So one of the things we have in the UK, and I'm sure it's everywhere, we have a challenge with skills. We either have skills where, well, this might change a bit now, where we're transitioning to green technology and oil and gas is getting less. I know there's a bit of a change in rhetoric on that now, and BP have changed things there as well. But in effect, we're looking at if you wanted people to move to a green industrial future from maybe a less green industry, what skills would they have? Do they have the right skills? What training might we need to make sure these people can take the jobs and want to take the jobs? So one of the things we did in the UK is we actually looked at what kind of skills were being advertised, and we looked at over 11 years of data of all jobs being advertised in that sector. You obviously pay for that kind of database to analyse it. And we analysed it, we worked out levels of skills, the normal skills, then the digital skills, the basic level, the intermediate level, the advanced level, and advanced programming. And what we then categorised in how was that working, what was being asked for in jobs, what is the government doing just now in regards to training, and how might their policies change. And we did that with the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority and Offshore Energy UK. And their feedback was that basically most of the stuff is when we did all the analytics, we showed that most of the things were focused on basic training, but actually you needed the intermediate training. So we created a methodological approach that no matter what sector you're looking at, you could then reapply that approach and have consistency, and how our government advisors can use that to help policy. So we fed that obviously into our policy makers. The next bit as well is digital adoption, dignity cards. I don't know, does your universities and companies here have dignity and respect policies? So in the UK it's really strong, I don't know what it is everywhere. But actually when you try and discuss dignity, if you come into a room with me and say, I'd like to discuss dignity with you, and a lot of people are looking at the floor and not sure what to say, it's quite a hard conversation to have. And the purpose we looked at these cards were, when you're looking at digital adoption, sometimes you forget about dignity. You actually forget about the other impact on stakeholders and the implications of your decision, because you might be looking at, oh, I can get 100 people through the line. So my standard example is I come to the US, and every time I come, you do the fingerprinting in the US when you arrive. Well, if anybody can see my right hand, does that right hand ever look as if it's going to go flat? It's not been flat for 20 years. It's never going to go flat. But I get to the customs, and they tell me, man, would you just put your hand down flat? And I go, my hand's not going to go flat. Let's have a try, they say. I'm thinking, my surgeon can't get this flat. Trust me, you're not going to get it flat. But they still try. So step one, they try. Then step two, I think this time Sue was smiling, because this time the lady was physically pushing my hand down, trying to get my fingerprints read. She wasn't being aggressive. She wasn't being horrible. She was doing her job, because her system said, you had to get my fingerprints. So we try that. We try it again. We try my thumb. We try the finger. We try my left hand. Eventually, we get some kind of reading. I don't know what we get. But actually, my dignity, all that time, I'm in front of everyone, and you're making me look like an idiot. You're trying to tell me my hand will go flat. It's not going to go flat. Nothing wrong with the person doing the job, but the design of the system didn't think about the stakeholders. If I'm being honest, I probably wouldn't change the system design, because actually, if you think about the throughput, it does work in probably 99% of the cases, and the millions of people coming through that might make sense. But you should have been aware of the impacts of it, and maybe train how you deal with that outside of that, or is there another route or something else you could do? So actually, these are really quite important. And what we did is we tested that in small to medium-sized enterprise manufacturers. And in general, in the UK, they tend to be family-run, really quite small businesses. They went down okay, but they wouldn't be the thing. I think they have a bigger implication with larger businesses, be easier to embed into their processes. But they did say they want 40% said they'd like to evaluate them in their companies, which to us was actually quite a big win, especially from manufacturing companies. And actually 80% said they raised topics that didn't concern. So the whole purpose of these cards is when you're looking at digitalization and adoption, you're trying to bring in all the different types of people and mindsets and impacts it might have. It doesn't mean you don't do it, but you do have to think about the implications of what you're doing. The other thing we looked at is we have a thing called manufacturing execution systems. So if you're in a manufacturing bit, you want to track everything, you want to know what's happening. And we have companies that sell these, obviously, to industry. And that's a nice digital tool, which is fantastic. But actually, one of our partners came to us and said, we're selling these to companies, but actually we don't know if they're maximizing the benefit from them. So they're doing the basic stuff that you always do, you know, looking at scheduling, looking at tracking, etc. So we had one of our, it's actually an undergraduate student that looked at this. And they actually looked at 900 customer things. So every time there's a complaint or a query, this company stored all that information. So they went and looked at it, and all they want to do is say, let's go and look at what do the users do, what are the complaints, what do the data say, and it's often in text form, so they have to analyze that. And actually the whole purpose there is, could we reduce errors? Now, it's not necessarily human errors, it's often lack of training or lack of how to use the tool the appropriate way, etc., etc. So how could we maybe change that? It was to maximize the value from the MES system that they were paying for. So what we did is we actually looked at particular strategies to reduce errors. So some things we came up was the training and documentation. And again, this is just looking at, when you look at a people perspective and you look at different mindsets, looking at more than the technology, what can we do to make it better? So identified errors in programming. They identified that the people really just stopped being engaged. So I don't know if any of you do any kind of change management, whether it be physical products or changing a process, when you often go back 18 months later, unless it's designed in, often it's not sustained. So you start off really well, everyone's really enthusiastic, they get all excited, and your productivity goes up or your errors go down or whatever it is, and then you plateau a bit, and then you start coming back to where you were before. So actually, it's looking at that and trying to find ways how we could build that in and do the training. So we've now got proposed trigger points to help with that training and improve that process. I'm looking, because if I run out of time, I'll be in trouble. The other bit that we thoroughly enjoyed doing is, again, the UK is a very small country. We have what I would call a tight labour workforce. We don't have enough people to do what we need to do. And for the last 15 years, our Royal Academy of Engineering has been saying, we do not have enough engineers, we will not have enough engineers. We're now saying we don't have enough of anything, to be quite honest, in many areas. So what we then said is, we did some work, and it came back down to the skills. We had some work looking at neurodiversity. So, and this is really quite important, because what we have is, we did it with a company called BIM for Water, well, an organisation, and they represent all the water companies in the UK. And they were looking at digitalisation in the UK. But actually, they'd never even just thought about widening their workforce and the kind of people they could employ or whatever. So when we looked at that, they're estimated 27,000 vacancies they're going to have. And the water sector in the UK is coming under an awful amount of pressure. One about money and one about polluting the rivers and everything else that's going on. Then we said, actually, when you look at it, 80 to 85% are unemployed or underemployed. So actually what we then have, if you look at it from a whole point of a UK perspective, we have people that want to work. We're not actually letting them work. Then when we do let them work, we're not letting them do what they're really good at. We're really limiting what they do. So what we've identified is lots of companies had very good practices about getting people in. But then when they got into the environment, they kind of got left to flounder. And therefore they didn't sustain, and they didn't do as much work as they could, and then they didn't stay, and then people were, you can imagine that cycle. And our logic as well, one, you want people to enjoy their work and be in work when they can be in work. And two, if they're in work, we're not paying them benefit. So if you think it's a win-win for everyone here, it's a really positive kind of outlook. But actually we looked at how do we actually access that? What can we do to help them, and how digital tools can help them do that? And it comes to really simple things. So one of the researchers that did one bit of work in this area, they were autistic. And what they actually found is someone like me might send them an email. And you do a lot of waffle in an email sometimes, don't you? And a whole lot of dribble that isn't needed in the email, but you do it because it's just the way you write. And that individual really needed that email to be, just tell me the salient points. What do I need to do? I need it in bullet point for that individual. And every case is different. There's not all one size fits all. So actually you could use digitalization and really the tech of today just to actually analyze that email and say, here's the key points. And then they get that information, they can then make a decision. It was little things like that that really found really helpful. So we said, these are the kind of things you could use. But the whole thing there was actually what it did in the water sector, not so much about using the tech, but actually starting the conversation. They'd actually never discussed it. And now when you go to any of the big digital construction events or in the water sector events, they're big events, they're discussing neurodiversity. How do we engage the wider workforce and actually get things to work? And that only comes from thinking about diverse viewpoints, different ways of doing things, and considering the wider benefits. And at this stage, what we now have is, because it's such a topical area, and really quite important, in Bath we have I'm going to get Sue, sorry, what's it right, the Autistic Centre for Autism? Right, so we have a Centre for Applied Autism Research, and they're actually really good, and we never knew about them until we started this work. It's unbelievable. We're literally, you could probably walked across a 2-minute walk and I could have been in their office. But by doing this work, we've then actually been working together, and we now have 2 PhDs, one looking at digital overload and one looking at, and I can't remember, and she will tell me again, digital skills. You can tell we work as a team because I can never remember half the things going on. But actually that's all come out literally from a 6-week undergraduate project to start with, and then we did some specialist research on it. We did a We've got a paper, a Q1 paper on skills and neurodivergence in universities, all from a little bit of research thinking, because we thought of the wider impact of how do we use transdisciplinary working and how do we use skills and people together from different mindsets. Now, if I look at some further examples, I'm going to be finished too early, you're going to tell me off in a minute. If I look at some further examples, what we have done is when you look at metrics for success, so when we look at adopting digitalization, the standard metrics for success is, did I get my throughput quicker? Did I get return on investment? They're all the kind of hard business level metrics. But actually we said, what are the people metrics? What are the metrics actually that also involve people? In other words, if you looked at these metrics, would HR be thinking, is my attrition rate, I've got less turnover of staff? Or actually, would the shop floor be thinking, actually my metric of success is I come in and I'm enjoying my work? There'll be different levers that people can pull. But it depends on what viewpoint you're on. So what we find, like any industry, if you went down and you're in the shop floor, you've got one lens. If you're in the C-suite, your lens is quite different from the shop floor. You've got different challenges, different dynamics, and different pressures. So we created this tool that one identified the people-led metrics and the metrics for success. And what we do is we then have people from different dimensions in the company completing that tool. Completing their view about what are the most important metrics and what are important to them. That then helps when you're looking at adopting digitalization. Where are my tensions? And it doesn't mean, again, that you change what you're doing, but what you're doing is you're selecting your solution, understanding the wider dimensions and impact. And my view is, if we can get it right as early as possible, more chance of success, less chance of having to do things again. We also have, one of our researchers created a augmented reality tool and a fit-for-purpose augmented reality tool. So if any of you want to use augmented reality, and you go to someone that's selling you the kit, well, you know what? Funnily enough, they're going to sell you the most expensive bit of kit they can. Their job is to get sales and get money in, often, not always. So this tool he's created is building on what do you actually need for your business, so actually we can target you to the most appropriate tool for you. And there was little things as well that came out on this. What we also found out, the headsets you can also put on. Did you know that actually women get more travel sick feeling with these headsets on than men? I didn't know that until I tried it. I felt quite sick, actually. So actually, it's little things like that. So when we're doing that design and the wider concept, we're looking at what's right for you. But then again, I do get travel sick playing Mario Kart, so I'm probably not the best example. And then we looked at legitimacy cards. So legitimacy cards are, is this the appropriate thing to do? Is it actually a fair enough thing to do in terms of digitalization and the impact on people? And what we did is we actually tested this with Rolls-Royce nuclear submarines. So they actually took it, obviously we were not allowed in to test it because you have all the other sign-off constraints and confidentiality constraints because of the nature of the business. But they took our cars, they tried them out under 3 workshops in their business, and the feedback they came, obviously what they fed back 2 things. The language needs to be a little bit less academic, and that's why we're doing that, so that's okay with that. They also fed back saying, actually, we can use this for more than digital projects, we can use it with any change we're doing. So that was quite a positive outcome. And I've got the metrics there. So when I'm actually talking about the next steps, and I'm realizing I am ahead of schedule, I do apologize. One of the things we have done is we saw people-led and transdisciplinary working is really important. And bringing in all these different mindsets together and disciplines were key to success. But there's a number of things we learned from doing our projects. One was the first thing you do, and it sounds so basic, is actually you have a glossary of terms. Because basically what we found and what we learned over all the projects we're doing, you actually need to understand what you're talking about. So I might be in a room and I might say, oh, I'm going to optimize this. So in my head, I know what I mean by optimize. It isn't probably optimize, it's not a mathematical optimization. It's actually in my head making it the best I can. It's actually usable. In someone else's head, the mathematician will be looking at proper, pure algorithms to optimize it. The other person will be thinking, optimize it, oh, that's why I'm happier and better at work and my seat's more comfortable. All different mindsets. So at that point, we found the glossary of terms one of the first things you should do, and then keep updating it as you're going along, because new terms come out, both from an industry perspective and from an actual individual discipline perspective as well. And when we've been working with companies, we've done that right at the beginning. And we've done that because company language is different. So Rolls-Royce Nuclear Subs has a completely different language from our construction people. They're different languages, different terms that they use. So right at the beginning, the outset of any project we do, we lay down what the terms mean and what we're talking about. So when we're having discussions and meetings, everyone's on the same page. That's kind of the key learnings there. But we also then learned that when we look at people-led, it doesn't matter what lens you're looking at, whether you're doing digitalization, or you want to improve a manufacturing system, or you want to make something greener. So we just won some money to do people-led net zero. And that is looking at systems approaches to net zero. And for that, we need to have what we call test cases. So again, like I say, our government is really focused on creating impact with the research we're doing. They still want the papers, don't get me wrong, but they want impact. So when they looked at this, he said, what actually happens when you do a net zero transition? And often you'll see people, all their focus on is that net zero journey, and everything else falls in the wayside. And there can be positives and negatives of a net zero journey. So what they want to look at is look at the systems approaches to net zero and any unintended consequences, or unintended benefits. So we have to look at what's the impact on the community, what's the impact on, say, the natural capital, what's the impact on jobs, what's the impact, so they actually understand the consequences of it. So then when they're making decisions on what to do, they're making informed decisions. We might still not like the decisions, but at least they're informed decisions. So that started actually on the 1st of February. And then we're putting some other funding in for beyond net zero. So you do want to find us. You can look at our webpage, and what you'll find, at the moment we've only got 9 industrial case studies up. And they're case studies that basically they have a bit from the company as well, what we've done in terms of the impact. And to reiterate, that could only be achieved because we actually engaged different disciplines and worked as on an end goal purpose of where we're going. And then that's it. 46 seconds left. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Nunes. It's really enlightening to hear somebody who has not only studied the thing, but also walked the walk and deliver for so long, and still delivering some great results for society. The organization committee told me that we don't have time for questions because of the next event.
No worries.
But you contact us.
I'm saved now.
To the mail directly. I could convey the questions to you and eventually get them back.
Yeah.
So please give a round of applause to Professor Nunes.
Thank you. Thank you
And
very
we
much.
have a small something for you to remember us that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, what to?